Our guest today is someone that I've been admiring for years coming from the Flutter community, but he has done way more than just actually supporting, helping, and growing the Flutter community. He is an industry veteran that has worked at places like Intel, Microsoft, of course, Google and Flutter, Meta, Sourcegraph. And today he's running one of the most exciting open source projects that can actually change how we write code. That is Gas City. Our guest today is Chris Hills. Chris, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I've been looking for this day for a long, long time. I know that I've reached out recently, but when I started designing this podcast, I started putting together like a list of what would be the 20 guests that I would love to have, regardless of the topic or whatever. Like you were on my top of the list. So it's kind of like a dream come true today.
Well, I'm happy to make your dreams come true, Jorge, and hopefully it's not just the podcast, but the projects we're working on too.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that I'm very excited about to talk to you is that probably we're going to be talking about the future. And I think that you're in a position where like you can make that future a reality. So I think that where this conversation is going to go is very like forward thinking. It might be even like a little bit of a wow moment for a lot of people, but at the same time, for you, it should be like kind of like living in the present. So I'm very excited. And my first question to you is that, of course, you've been building software for quite some time in large organizations, in places where like either like you also needed like to move fast, right? Like you've seen a lot of different environments when it comes to software. So when you look back, and especially as we introduce AI in the equation, is there something that feels genuinely different to you? And is there something else that feels like, hey, it's the same problem, just different costume, different kind of like tools, but it's the same problem?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, fundamentally, the problem is exactly the same, which is we have software shaped problems and we need high quality software solutions. And that is what we have been doing. I mean, I started 40 years ago on my Apple II Plus in my mom's basement, right, when I was in high school, right? And I was a solo dev I was building forms over data based reporting software, which is just a fancy way of saying I built a database to keep all my D&D characters in it. Um, and I have been, doing software of one kind or another ever since. And every time, up until very recently, every time I would write some code, it would be by hand, right? I mean, we have been building up software tools to help developers write code for years and years and years, and to diagnose code and fix broken code and to test code and etc. Right? And all kinds of optimizers and profilers and debuggers and editors and syntax highlighting and syntax completion and breakpoints and all of these magic things that we've been building. But at the end of the day, it was always a human typing every line of every file in your projects. And that has all changed recently with the invention and then popularity of AI coding agents. And this is really the biggest change. I mean, if you think about just kind of, changes in the industry, this is the first time we're still using text files, but at the edges of agentic engineering, not only are we not writing the code anymore, we're not even reading the code anymore, right? And by we, I mean the humans.
Uh-huh.
And this is the biggest change since we went from punch cards to text files. Right now we're going to, oh sure, there are text files involved, but it's really somebody else that we're working with. But the problem, the goal is still the same, right? Which is there are software shaped problems in the world, and we need high quality solutions to them. And
Uh-huh.
so, initially coding agents were really good at something we called vibe coding, right? Which is, you would feed in some requirements and it would give you some code. And then over time, it got better and better at Oh, well, that code doesn't actually compile. Let me fix that part. Oh, that code doesn't actually run. Let me fix that part. Now it's to, oh, this code doesn't actually look like it's supposed to. Let me fix that part, right? With browser automation and Playwright and things like that. And of course, these agents have been getting better and better over time and being able to do more and more. And so vibe coding's gotten really, really good. But that is different from what we actually need. And I actually draw a line between vibe coding, which is, hey, I built a thing that works. That's great. To, oh, I built a feature or fix for my existing enterprise level system that I actually can check in and have confidence that it's going to produce under load with the latency requirements that I need and the side effects that I require, and not side effects I don't want, and integrate with our logging system and our escalation system, and the list goes on, right?
Yeah.
Building real, as you know, right? Building real enterprise software requires way more than it works on my machine, right? And that is the core difference, I think. So the problem's still the same, but the way we achieve it with AI coding agents and agentic engineering is changing fundamentally the entire industry.
Help me to ground a little bit the conversation, because I think you mentioned something in like that distinction between vibe coding and what it requires then to build enterprise grade software. In the industry, we put a lot of emphasis on quality, but then everybody has a different interpretation of what quality is. It's funny. It's like for being a engineering industry, I don't think we have yet like a list of like, we do have metrics, but there's no kind of like uh, a contract across the organization where like we agree on what quality is. And I think that that is very important now more than ever, because if we're going to have an agent running code on our behalf, producing and all the stuff, right? Quality gates, what we consider high quality code is more important. So help us to ground this conversation. From your point of view and the way you see quality, how would you try to describe it?
Yeah, that is interesting. Again, up until very recently, and in fact, even the current state of the art with, with agentic engineering, where software engineers are spending their time driving, one or, three or 10 of these AI coding agents in multiple, command line terminals, and they swap between them and they push them all forward one prompt at a time, right? Until they get what they want. And then what they want is what you're asking, right? What is not, it's just not about the features. It's about the non-functional requirements as well. It's about, what is the quality we require and what are the metrics. And so the current state of the art is very much around handcrafted software, right? Either typing every line of every file in your project, right? Now we type all of the prompts, and we have things like skills to help us, right, capture some prompts and spit them out kind of on demand, right? But it's very much I am handcrafting the prompts that I send to all these agents. And the opportunity I see to get to the quality you want is, to me, I know we call them software factories, but it really feels like our version of the Industrial Revolution as we move from handcrafting software to handcrafting prompts to actually automating those prompts, right? And so the reason that's interesting is because as we figure out, I mean, we have been doing this as a software engineering discipline literally for decades. We've invented the single responsibility principle and do not repeat yourself and you're not going to need it. And, all of these metrics like cyclomatic complexity and all of these things that we have used over and over again, even to this day. Even with a lot of folks that use agentic engineering, they still go through the same human review process, and they have this is what our internal coding standards look like, right? And every org has their own, because we have, as an industry, have been very slow to move those quality standards forward. And, we write them down in blog posts. In the old days, we used to write them down in books, right? And we give conference talks, and things move very slowly in terms of how we measure quality and how that improves over time, because there is a blocker right in the way, which is all of these. We've had some static analysis tools that can help us with these things, but a lot of it has been us as engineers hand reading the code and applying those metrics in our head, right? Yeah. Oh, this doesn't meet the DRY principle. This that doesn't have the loose coupling and the high cohesion that we want, or whatever set of standards. And we don't have the bandwidth as humans to keep all of the functional requirements on Rails. Oh, we've got a schedule and we're trying to implement these features and fix these bugs, as well as all of the quality standards. That's why we have things like, debt. We think about debt in our software, and how do we negotiate as engineers with our PMs to get time on the schedule to deal with paying down the software debt, which is really just another way of saying, how do we raise the quality of the software we've got to the bar that we want, right? And so what these AI agents, as we mechanize, as we automate and build software factories, where we're no longer handcrafting the prompts, but rather saying, here's a thing I want to do. Here's an issue I want to deal with. Here's a PR I want to review. Here's a feature I want to implement. Here is the orchestration workflow, right? I want to use this agent for this piece, and then I want to loop with these agents to do gap analysis. Then I want to loop with this other set of agents to look for individual compliance with the architecture best practices. And I want to work until I get to this metric from a quality bar. Then I want to look at the static analysis and iterate until cyclomatic complexity is down. All of those things matter, right? The reason they matter, the reason the quality of your code still matters, even in this age of agentic engineering, when the text almost doesn't matter, and the agents can be deployed literally in swarms by the dozens to go and re-architect and refactor your code on demand, is because unless you stick to those same software engineering principles that we've been manually applying as humans for years, what happens is your code is brittle, right? That's why we invented all these things, right? If you don't, for example, ask your agent to go through and squeeze out every repeated everything in your code, what that means is later, when you have a bug, agent will find the place with one set of code and fix it there and leave it in all the other places, just like humans, right? It's the exact same thing, right? So you still want to have that same code quality, those same things that we have figured out as software engineers that bring high quality software. We want all of that in our code, but now we have this unique opportunity where we can automate that, right? We can deploy in the same way that we're deploying, an agent or a swarm of agents to go and build out all of my functional requirements. I can deploy those same set of agents to build out all of the non-functional requirements, right? And so the value of a software factory is that you can walk up and say, oh, I have this new feature I want to build, right? Here's the thing, here's how you know what done looks like. But you can also build up workflows, automation, orchestrations that say, okay, that's the work, but here's how we do it, right? We use red-green TDD, and we use a loop for gap analysis on the functional requirements, and then here's our organization security requirements, and here's the existing source code base that we have to make sure that we integrate properly with, or maybe there's refactoring and we have to have that conversation. There's the architectural best principles. Here are the metrics from a performance and latency point of view. Keep working until we are under that bar. We have the opportunity to not only define on a per organization basis what quality looks like, But as we do that and we encapsulate that in those workflows, we also have the opportunity to share those, right? We can share them much faster, right? As we tune them and learn and our software factories get better and better, we can take that data and then we can share them, right? We can make them available directly as sets of prompts, as formulas, as workflows, as agent definitions, as skills, as all of this bundle of stuff. And we can pack it up and say, here you go, this is the way we do it. And I'd really like to know how you do it so that we can, over time, continue to drive forward as an industry what high quality software looks like.
Yeah. I do think that it's a fascinating time because those, whether they're individuals or teams, that they can articulate with clarity what's their point of view on quality and how they can actually translate it into something that is repeatable, teachable, things like that.
That's right.
They're in a much better position to adopt agentic workflows today and continue expanding with that. And I think that that is one of the challenges that the industry has today. It's like there's a difference between adopting AI or answering the question like, are you ready to adopt it? Like you can use any tool, but if you don't have a common understanding of like what do you expect from your agent, is when you start seeing like that slow, that kind of like vibe coding disconnected pieces that they don't go together. But I've seen those teams that they have clarity on what quality is, and then they can translate it into quality tech, skills, things like that, that they can actually produce high quality work with their agents in collaboration with the humans that they have in the loop as well.
Yeah, it is interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine who's kind of climbing the ladder of agentic engineering, like everyone, right? Everyone's on their journey in terms of their adoption of these tools, and everyone was like, "Hey, I told it to build me a thing, and it couldn't even get that right." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's start from the beginning. What did you tell it? Now, if you had walked into an intern's office and that was brand new to your company, had no access or previous knowledge of your source code, and you'd ask them to do that exact same thing, would they have been successful? Well, no, they wouldn't have. Blah blah blah." I'm like, okay, well, the agent doesn't know any more about your source code than that intern does. So let's talk about how we talk to these agents and what we ask them to do. Because then the second thing I get is, oh, sure, it worked on my machine, but the quality was crap. I couldn't possibly. And I'm like, okay, well, what did you tell it in terms of what your metrics for best practices were, and your the organization set of requirements for good software? And so many of us have been building these skills internally, and we have our own kind of feeling, right? We even call it, a code smell. That doesn't smell right. Well, agents can't smell shit, right? So, what we need to do is to be able to take all of that amorphous idea of quality, right? What is a good quality code base, and figure out how to write it down, right? And that's what helps us move from software engineering as craft to software engineering as actual engineering, right? Because that's what real engineering disciplines do, right? What is quality? What is the tolerances for error? How do you measure what you want, and how do you tune it over time? That's what turns this into a real engineering discipline.
Yeah. Let's think about 2 years from now. And I think that that's still a very long time horizon, right? But if we think about a developer's normal day-to-day today would look like, hey, I go in the morning, open my computer, maybe have some task that I didn't complete the day before. But pretty much it usually goes to like, hey, there's some sort of like task tracking manager, Jira, Linear, something along those lines. You pick up that story, look at the requirements, start building the code, right? Like now you can use like an agentic solution, whether it's Claude, Gemini, Codex, whatever that is, right? But eventually you take that code, put it in like what we call like a pull request. This is ready for review. And you're going to have, whether it's another agent or like someone in your team reviewing that code, giving you feedback and going through that like loop experience until you feel like, hey, this is ready to push to production. And then like you merge it to a main where like you call it production, development, things like that. And that's more like the normal workflow of a developer. Is that gonna be the workflow in 2 years from now? Like what if you had like a magic ball, and I know that you're working on making that a reality, how will a normal day for a developer look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we're kind of a little further in the future. At Gas City, we have 23 public repos at last count. And we have our own software factory that we've built on top of Gas City.
Uh-huh.
And what we have is, like 100 agents running 24/7. Across all of those repos, we deal with more than 100 user contributions in terms of uh, uh, issues and PRs across all of those repos that we're dealing with at a time. I think our peak is in the number of PRs that we merged in a single day is in the 70 something. I mean, the productivity you can get there is high, but of course, you can create as many PRs and merge them as you want to, as long as you don't care about quality. And so what we have done, because we do very much care about quality, is that we've done those things that you've said, right? That we've captured in skills and specifically orchestrations and formulas, and we've been building up the capabilities of the orchestration engine so that it can handle any number of steps, any number of agents, so you can have any number of agents from any number of providers. And what we find that when we enabled that, what we got is when we started doing those quality loops and the gap analysis loops and the test coverage loops, is that harnessing, because all of these agents are trained differently, that they all have different points of view about quality. And so what you do is we run between 2 and 30 of them every time we go through a loop, and we capture all that data and we squeeze it together, and we like, oh, this is very strong signal. These are obviously things we should fix, versus this agent thinks that, or maybe that's hallucination. Maybe that's not even really true, right? And the noise kind of cancels itself out, and the signal is very strong, which is how you get. And so that, I think, is one step into the future, or a couple of steps into the future from where we are now. And the way we use that is, we produce PRDs as proposals, as issues. And of course, the users have their own feature requests as issues. They have their own bug reports as issues. And then PRs, right? Which is, here's a problem we're trying to solve, and some code that goes along with it. And we really treat all of those the same, which is really, here's some thing that we would like some way we would like the system to change, and more or less code that comes along with that particular change. And what we do is we apply our human judgment up front. Hey, let's take a look at this issue. Is this adding something to the system or fixing something in the system that belongs to this project? Is it part of what we're trying to accomplish, right? Does it follow the intent, right? And so we spend some time digging into each one and really understanding it. But what we don't focus on is this built with the correct architecture? Is this the correct implementation? Is there a full set of test coverage? Is it at the quality bar we need? We don't worry about that piece. What we do is we worry about, at the intent level, is this something we want in our project, right? And then, if it is, we flip a bit and we walk away, because then the agents take over and we have workflows that are like, oh, here's how to make sure it's properly architected. Here's how to make sure it's properly implemented and it's got the right tests in place. And at that point, it can just be merged, right? So once we figure out, yes, this is something we want in our project, we set a label and the agents take over, right? They get a notification and then they just go. That feels like it's kind of in the future, right? That you can just focus the humans on what is it we want from our system, right? And then that frees as opposed to what's the best way to write the code. Well, let's figure out as an industry what the right way to write the code is, encapsulate those in the formulas and the skills and the agents and et cetera. And then The important part, the human part, is that we have an agenda. It's our job to figure out what belongs in there, right? What's the intent of a project or a set of projects? And so the way we then spend our time as software engineers is less on implementing the individual features, but more on the implementing the software factory itself, right?
That's
What
true.
are the set of things that we do with our software factory? Because it's more than just, deal with issues and deal with PRs and deal with, new features, but it's also staging, testing, building releases, deploying releases, watching a release that's in production for logs and errors and performance characteristics that don't match our needs. We're building software factories that do the entire software development lifecycle, and that feels pretty magic too, right? So we feel like we're living in the future a little bit, and what we're trying to do is make it a lot easier to understand what we've done, a lot more approachable, a lot easier for people to take these techniques and this software and these projects that we've built and applying them to their own problems. And then the engine gets better over time and the orchestrations, and we learn more from each other. And then we're iterating as an industry, right? As we move forward, right? Using these tools to get better and better and do more and more. That's the journey we're on, really trying to help people, because everyone's on their own journey, right? Some are like, oh my God, this AI thing, that's not how how I did this. That's not how my ancestors did this, right? I'm not going to be using AI to write my code, or I'm not going to be using AI to review my code, or I'm not getting the quality I want, or now I've got multiple, instances of my favorite coding agent to, let me bring in feedback and pick the right coding agent with the right model that does different things better. Let me harness the value of having multiple of them give feedback and understand different training and different points of view. All of that, by the way, has the human analogy, right? That's just like a set of stakeholders taking a look at your software, right? A bunch of code reviewers looking at your software. They all have their training. They all have their own biases. They all have their own points of view, and they point out different things. Right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing, right? Because that's what agents are. I mean, a lot of people want to treat agents as a program, right? Like a deterministic program. Incomes, inputs, I get deterministic outputs. That, if you think of it that way, you're going to have trouble. That's not how they act. They actually act a lot more like people, right? Because it's a neural network trained, on the sum total of all human knowledge. They act more like us than we act like programs, right? And so that is the value as we think about moving these forward, because the other thing that we get, in addition to running the software factory, we also use Gas City to run our agents that help us run the company, right? So we have, there's just a few of us humans working on the project, although that number is growing over time. It's actually, by the time you count the actual maintainers and the mods and the community and our partners, we're probably up to 12, 15 actual humans participating in the software factory and all working together on it from multiple angles in this set of projects. But we have at least that many agents as well, right? We use Gas City as a general purpose agent OS for running, Seth the SRE and Randy the release manager and Maya the marketing director. And we have this set of Agentic employees that we have built and tuned and given skills and prompts and responsibilities and memory, right, to be able to help us run the company as a whole. And so that feels a little bit like the future too, right? Being able to not just have this set of agents that we can, start up sessions with and talk to, but we can get to them through any number of connectors with Discord and Slack and SMS and email. And we can have multiple humans and agents in the same conversation at the same time, right? So, if I want to move the website forward, I'll bring in Maya, the marketing person, and Lawrence, the legal person, and um, what is her name? Priya, our user experience designer. And we will have conversations about, okay, how well is the landing page holding up? What should we do to move it forward? And then I get multiple points of view, right? The
Mhm.
legal advice comes back as different from the marketing advice, which comes back different from the user experience advice. Being able to think of them not just as a factory of agents producing quality software at whatever dial you turn it at, but also teammates
Yeah, yeah,
with
yeah.
memories and points of view. That feels a little bit like the future too.
That point right there is one of the most fascinating use cases for me personally to have experience. Because if you want to run a company, you want to run a team and start like gathering like a larger point of view of like all the things that are involved. Of course, like everyone has a different degree of expertise in many areas, but I don't know about you. I'm not a marketing expert, but I'm highly
Right.
interested in marketing and how to advocate for our team and improve the presence of our brand and our company. And all of a sudden, I have a partner available to me 24/7 that can treat me as an engineer interested in learning about marketing and give me knowledge, actionable items. They can even actually take ownership of many of the things that we do. And I've seen that pretty much like a game changer for my personal functioning, but also like for the functioning of the company and things like that. It's like
Mhm.
all of a sudden, you don't have to wait for the director of marketing, like the real person that has limited availability and all the stuff.
That's
Like,
right.
no, you can have that real conversation there. To me, that's a fascinating use case. One of the things that you are a very prolific writer. You have salesbrothers.com. You've written many books and all the stuff. So doing research for this episode has been really, really fun because I get to go uh, like down memory lane and all the stuff. Right. And I was looking at a few quotes that caught my attention, and I think in one of the places where you were trying to describe like what is a software factory and especially like an AI software factory, you were talking about like, hey, something that builds, validates, deploys, operates, and maintains production software. And I think that many people today, they just stop at like AI write software and
Sure.
they forget about maintenance, they forget about operations. But I do believe that that is something that you're baking in as a first class citizen with Gas
That's right.
City. Uh, Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, where do AI agents fit in the operation and maintenance and evolution of the system?
Yeah, so there's really a few ways to think about, how to interact with agents in general, right? So, for example, when I sit down, I'm like, oh, I have this crazy idea for X, Y, and Z that I want to see in our software. I often start with a conversation with an agent, and it's often Claude. I find that Claude is really great at this interactive kind of um, planning and thinking through things and making me think about ideas that I hadn't considered. Right, I find it super useful, and then I get to okay, this sounds like a good plan, right? Then my typical top coding agent turns out to be Codex 5.5. It is a huge game changer. I mean, from my point of view, the difference between 5.4 and 5.5, they could have really called it 6.0, and I would have. That makes sense to me, right? It is that big of a step change. So I typically, in my own workflows, Codex is the one that does the first level of coding for me. And then, of course, I spread it out across Gemini, and we've been experimenting, Codex and Claude for reviews, but also we've been experimenting with various open source models too, because we own the workflows, we own the loops, we own the agents, and the agents, we have 17 support for 17 separate CLI coding agents in Gas City. Anything you can imagine. So you can plug in not just the model you want, because of course, we support things like open code that is specific, generic, But the AI coding agent, because of course, Claude Code was tuned for the Claude models, and so was Codex and Gemini, and the Moonshot CLI, tuned for Kimi K 2.x, and etc. Right, and so you can plug in all of the CLIs that you want, and so all of that is a fantastic way to get a spread of wonderful feedback, and so that's the kind of if you think of the traditional dark factory, that's the okay, I've got a plan, now let me hand it to my factory to implement it and stage it and test it and validate it, all that. But then it's really easy to think about this other kind of interface, which is, well, I've got, feedback coming in via issues. Oh, let me do some exploration, set a label. And, again, a swarm of agents. Or I've got a PR. Let me set a label and a swarm of agents, right? So that much more automated, right? Oh, I take a look. But then there's also the, like time-based cron jobs, right? Where you can actually go through and think about how you improve your software factory over time based on the signals of the software factory itself, right? So if you think of new feature requests and customer sentiment and issues and PRs as kind of signals to the software, then you can think of that history of all of those conversations from all those agents and all of the test results and all of the prompts that you're using to drive things and we use beads as a work task management. All of that becomes information that we then capture into something we call a run. And a run is this set of related work that we're doing together, the tasks from beads and the formulas, the prompts and all of that, and then the changes, right? The commits. What were the commits that came out of that? And we can bundle all of that and we can use it. And we're experimenting with these features internally so that we can release them for folks. We can use them as live agent memory, and they just get better over time using that memory, or they can improve the software factory. And so that's how we spend our time is working with the agents to improve the software factory. And that goes all the way to the signals that you get are things like, error logs, and you're constantly checking for performance and health across all of that. And so you can build those and automate those, right, as another way of triggering agent activity. And that set of, hey, I want to work with something interactively, I want to trigger something via some event that's happened in my environment. Oh, I want to trigger it from some event that happens in my software, in my custom software. We support all of those integrations so that you can choose which of those events trigger that work from those agents, right? And so that core piece that I'm going to be able to trigger something from events that are happening in my software is allows us to build up all of the monitoring, right? Or hey, let me go check on things every hour, 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever, that automation that you can then trigger formulas to go and do more than just write software. You can trigger formulas to check the logs, trigger formulas to check the health, trigger formulas to check the latency and the uptime. All of that is available just as configuration in Gas City.
That's great. If you would have thing where I want to pick your brain is that I'm trying to think about the skills of the future, right? It's like many of us, we've been trained as we write software in the concept of like, this is a variable, this is an object, this is a class, and that's kind of like your micro components that you end up building and putting together in order to start building the feature and then the systems and things like that. And that's kind of like what a lot of the software engineering, that's why it has been so kind of like manual driven, so like handcrafted, has focused on it. Like, what's the quality of writing the right variable, objects, functions, blah, 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 and all the stuff, right? And with AI, it seems like that micro component, in the same way that we don't care about bits and bytes in memory, because all of a sudden now that's being managed and cleaned up by your compilers, garbage collectors, virtual machines, runtimes, and all the stuff. It seems like the next level of abstraction,
That's right.
it's going to be a little bit like the feature that for many of us, that might be the minimum amount of like intent that we might have to kind of like consider in order to start building about the system. And I like your analogy of like all of a sudden we can focus on the system. What impact do you think that's going to have in the skills of the future? What will we need to run a software factory effectively?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we have been doing this as a software industry for decades, right? At every opportunity. I mean, it seems like the hardware folks want to go deeper and deeper down, but the software folks want to go higher and higher up, right? I mean, when I started, an operating system was just the thing that could, I had a little audio tape and a tape player, and I would play my programs into the computer, and the job of the operating system was to listen and turn those into, in-memory bits and then execute, right? That was almost the entire operating system right there. And so we have been building up from that ever since, right? I mean, if you think about where a lot of the software is built today, I mean, it used to be that we'd spend a bunch of time writing something. I came up when Windows was all the rage, right? So everyone was building desktop software optimized for Windows. And then we invented the browser, and suddenly nobody writes desktop software anymore, or almost nobody, right? It's actually had a recent resurgence with Electron, which is ironic since it's based on the browser, right? It's the ability to be able to write your desktop form factor software and still have access to the resources you need on the machine, but do it in a way that's multi-platform, right? And then you think about the mobile revolution, where we were again, instead of writing desktop software, we were writing very low level tailored resource constrained, very Android or iOS specific software. Now we've got things like React Native and Flutter, right, which allows us to write the program we want in a mobile form factor, and in fact even a web form factor and a desktop form factor, right? We can write one app and have it be responsive, right, which is, hey, based on the size of the device that it's run on, it does things differently. The availability of things like mouse and keyboard input versus touch input, right? And so we have been building up the stacks of this software over and over again. But you're right, up until, the core, no matter what we have been building, it's always been around the core abstractions of a language, right? Maybe it's a functional language and it's all about functions and immutability, or maybe it's a object-oriented language and it's all about objects it turns out that in the same way that we no longer care about the specific platform or the specific assembly language that we're targeting, or the specific CPUs, except of course we want our code to take maximum advantage of those things, but we no longer write that code, we never longer read that code. We're now as an industry cranking up to the level of, okay, when I talk to an agent, I don't generally care about the way it arranges its class and its files and its things on disk anymore, right? I tend to think of subsystems, right? What are the main architecture pieces of my system? And maybe there's probably multiple of those in a single repo, depending on how large it is. Often there's multiple repos that are together building up a system, or maybe you're using a mono repo and you've got multiple projects in the same repo. But it's really about kind of that next level up. And at this point, I don't spend my time thinking about the core classes and the abstractions at that point. And instead I let two things happen. One, I let the AI agent choose the constructs it wants from a coding point of view. And then I set the quality metrics. And so we iterate on the generated code until it meets the quality bar. But I generally, depending on the language, maybe I let it pick the language because I'm doing some prototyping, proof of concepts. Maybe I pick the language because we're building something that matches an existing system, or I have some specific requirements that I want from the language. But then I typically let the coding agent choose the individual, abstractions, because the benefit of letting it choose the abstractions is when it goes to update things, it will typically reach for the abstractions that it picked in the first place,
Uh-huh.
right? So it's when it's looking for, oh, I need functionality that already happens in this project. Let me look for a class named X. It's probably there, right? Because it wrote it the way that it was most natural in the first place, right?
That's a very interesting point about like how much accountability do you want to have versus how much accountability and ownership and choice do you want to give agents. I want to start bringing the conversation actually a little bit more into what can we do with agents in the front end world. There's a lot of things that I've seen for like AI in the backend, right? And I think that I see a lot of potential. But like when we think about building experiences and you've built a bunch of them with Flutter, all of a sudden
Sure.
there's an element of taste, can be very subjective, it's very emotional. There's a level of comfort, innovation, visuals, animation, motion, right? That speaks very differently to very different groups of people and all the stuff. Uh, is taste something that we can automate, or is it going to be the least automatable thing that we can find?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you mentioned it somewhat similar when you were talking about marketing, right? You want some help marketing. So I get this question all the time when I go and talk to groups of engineers, and it typically boils down to, hey, if AI is going to be writing all the code, then what the hell do my employer need me for? And therefore, how do I pay my mortgage? How do I feed my family, right? Which is, these are pretty real world questions that really matter to people. And I can't see the future in terms of what the economy is going to be like and what the job market's going to be like. But here's what I can tell you is that the best people on the planet to own and operate software factories are teams of software engineers, UX designers, product people, right? They all bring their own judgment and taste, right? And these are things that are an agenda, right? It's not just what is the right way to build the thing, right? How do I define what functionality goes into it? How do I define what the user experience is going to look like? How do I define how to package it and put it in the hands of my customers? How do I figure out what the messaging is and really resonate with my potential customers, right? These are all valuable things that humans have done for a long time. But we're also, as you point out, busy building agents to help us do those things. But in the same way that software engineers run and operate software factories the best, UX designers are going to run and operate agent designers the best. And marketing people are going to run and operate marketing agents the best. Because what it boils down to is a software engineer, what I know is what I want, and I know how to keep pushing until I get what I want. And the same thing is true across all these other disciplines. I also do the same thing from a product point of view, because these are my, pair of expertise. And I can do it from a content point of view, because a developer relations kind of expertise. But when it comes to marketing, boy, I sure want a marketing person driving that marketing agent. I expect it'll make them 10 times faster, but that'll also make them 10 times better because they know what done looks like, and I don't. Right? Likewise with a UX designer, I don't have that training and expertise. I want the UX designer to give me designs, top quality designs, 10x faster, but only they really know what makes a top quality design, right? And so that's my point of view is you still want those people and you want those points of view and you want that expertise. The agents are just about making them go faster while maintaining that quality level.
I think that that's a very interesting point of view. I'm certainly on that boat as well. It's like there's a difference between having an education partner that can coach you, can guide you, but sometimes that is just acquiring like like knowledge or a point of view. But I do think that like a true expert, and this is where the human
Hmm.
aspect comes in. It's like it's not having the answer. Sometimes like having the right question
That's
that
right.
you can use to pull that thread to get to an answer that all of a sudden is not what you envision in the first place, right? Like I think that that's the beauty of this. Like we cannot consider AIs to have all the answers if we don't start with the right hypothesis or the right question.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fundamentally what it boils down to, right? It's taste and judgment, but also agenda, right? Agents will do whatever you ask them to do. They don't care. They don't have an agenda, right? And they'll do it to the best of their ability, which sometimes is great, sometimes is crappy. But unless you know how to tell the difference, that's the judge, right? And unless you have the agenda, here's what I'm trying to accomplish, you're going to get nowhere, right?
Yeah, I'm laughing because if David, who you know as well as CEO of
Sure.
VGV, is listening to the podcast, he calls that like trust, taste, and tempo. Like that's pretty much like the strategy right there. But now how you execute it is it's a big part. But yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
Um, Chris, I could be talking for hours with you. But I also know that you're very busy. So the last thing that I'm gonna ask from you is this has been a very interesting topic. It can be deep. It can be also like something that like for a lot of people can actually even like just create different emotions, right? We see that there's a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of change that can have people really excited, that can actually even create like a lot of anxiety and a different
Yeah,
group of
for
people and
sure.
all that stuff as well, right? But it's always really, for me, refreshing to talk with someone that is like just exploring, open minded, try to make something work in a very new, innovative way. And that is something that I really appreciate from this conversation. But now I want us to just shake our shoulders a little bit, get a little bit relaxed, and I'm going to ask you to participate in a quick lightning round that, of course, is going to have some AI elements, but also some Flutter elements because,
All
you've
right.
been a very
Great.
big part of the
Good,
community.
good. Yeah.
All right, so these are going to be 6 questions. No time to think, just let it go.
Great.
And the first one is like, what's a Flutter package you wish you had built that you didn't build?
Yeah. So the dynamic UI, I did some experimenting with AI driven dynamic UI, but there is a lot of value there in AI generated AI. Sorry, AI generated UI. And Flutter is the ideal platform because
Yeah.
it just runs everywhere.
Yeah, we're starting to see a lot of interesting Gen UI, the A2UI
Yeah.
protocol.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're barely scratching the surface. Not even what the tech can do, the way we think about the potential of the tech.
That's
Yeah.
right. I mean, right now, everything has. I mean, I worked at Meta on AR VR because I thought that would be the next generation user experience. No. Right now, it's not. It's agents answering questions in a text box. And there is so much more value and power we can get out of those AI agents when it comes to tailored UI experiences than just streams of text.
What's the model you reach out for like building a UI task, and what is the one that you would use for a backend type of work?
Yeah, so I tend to use Claude for design and well, so for planning and UI design, right? I do that, and then when it comes to coding the UI design or coding the back end, or pretty much any coding task, my go-to is Codex.
Sweet. Both in for the backend as well. So
Back
anything
end,
related?
front end, databases, right? When it comes, I mean, I find Codex to be 5.5 to be pretty magical. Yes.
Sweet, sweet. Uh, what would be one word that comes to mind to describe the state of AI generated UI?
Nascent. Oh, actually, I have a better word. Slow. Right? I have been able to build some toolkits that generate like Star Trek style, full featured, oh my God, AI on the fly, but it takes for friggin' ever. right? So that I will say slow is the word I would pick.
Sweet. You've been mentioning in this podcast a bunch of like different components that conform to Gas City, right? We've been talking about formulas, beats, and all the stuff. Is there a term that you regret naming? And is there a term that you think like, oh, I nailed this one? Because we know that naming things is hard.
Naming things is hard. Actually, a lot of the names we inherited from Steve Yagi in his initial work with Beats and Gastown. There are definitely upsides and downsides to the naming. The downsides is it's a set of new terminology, right? So people have to learn it. And so we've done a lot in Gas City. We want to keep the good names, and we want to remove the jargon that doesn't really help people. So we get things like cities and rigs and agents and sessions and formulas, things like that. But we've dropped a lot of the other things as being part of the implementation, as opposed to really concepts that people need to focus on in their own work. On the other hand, it is super handy to have a new set of terminology as we step into this whole new way of doing things, right? So we used to call them projects, now we call them rigs, but rigs are projects that have been configured with your city and all the agents and all the skills and all that new capability. And so it's not just a project, right? It's a new thing, right? We poured a software factory around your project, and we call that a rig. That's useful. That's useful terminology. So there's a learning curve. We work really hard to keep it as flat as possible, but there is also benefits of having new terms.
Nice. When do you think 50% of the Flutter apps out there will be built by a software factory?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're in transition as an industry from people that do hands-on coding. We're still transitioning to people using AI coding agents, right? And that's definitely where people are moving today. And when we have 2-day seminars where we teach people how to use Gas City to build software factories, and most people show up between, oh, I just fired up Claude Code for the first time yesterday, to, oh, I go back and forth between Codex and Claude in different scenarios. Very few of them show up really understanding even what the software factory is, let alone, how to take advantage or even think about it. So it'll be a while until I like to think that this year is the year we introduce software factories and get people on board. I really think next year is when they take off and become the dominant way of doing things.
I do think, this is my observation, I have no data to back it up, but I do think that at the individual level, there's people really advanced when it comes to what they do and how they think of UI usage, partnership, and things like that. It is at the team level, at the kind of like company level, many times, where I see that there's so many different levels of adoption that it's very hard for companies to sometimes even put together a strategy that helps everyone to move at the same pace, right? There's a few champions inside organizations, things like that, but I think teams, there's so much disparity at the moment that it's hard to calibrate.
It's interesting you bring up teams too, because so far agentic engineering has been very much a single player sport, right? You sit down on your computer and you assign yourself an issue or a PR and you start working on it with your coding agents, right? We are definitely building the features right now for our own software factory that make it multiplayer, right? Where all of us can talk to and work with the same software factory that's running all of our repos. And we're building those features so that we can up-level not just individuals, but teams in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. The last question I have for you: what part of software taste you're most confident that a model will never replace?
So we are barreling as fast as we can. All the money that everyone is, fabricating and dumping into AI and data centers and electricity generation is all towards a single goal, which is the singularity, right? This this, creation of this new species with its own intelligence and its own consciousness and its own agenda. So at that point, right, the singularity, which, by definition, we can't see beyond what happens right after the singularity. That's black hole, right? We don't know what's on the other side, right? That's what a singularity is. So I can't tell you what happens after that by definition. But that's where we're all headed. And until we get there, until AI really is its own conscious being with its own agenda, it's a tool. It's a fancy tool. It's a tool with a lot of power, and we're still learning how to harness and get the most out of that. But until that happens, it's a tool like any other.
That's a great answer for our last question. Chris, it's been a pleasure to have you as a guest. We've been talking about AI, but like your career, your experience is so vast that I feel like we could do just an entire season. Not that I'm going to ask yet, but I might ask eventually. But nonetheless, I just want to show you my gratitude for being here with us. And I mean, what you're building with Gas City is fascinating. And I haven't been able to participate because 2 kids, it's a lot of work, believe it or not.
Yeah. Oh, that's a full-time job all on its own.
More than a full-time job. I come to work to relax from the kids sometimes, but
That's
that's a
right.
different story. But again, it's been a real pleasure, and for me has been a great time talking to you. So we'll see you next time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Bye. Stop. Off.